Hello everyone, hope you're having a nice Dead by Daylight. I know I sure am. And tell me something, when was the last time you actually played against a hillbilly? When was the last time you played hillbilly? Outside, of course, if maybe you're the rare hillbilly main out of the two hillbilly mains that exist. Hillbilly used to be a really popular killer back in the day before his rework in mid-2020. He was hailed as one of the best designed killers in Dead by Daylight, both to play as and to play against. He was strong, but not too strong. But it seems like since his rework, he is almost never to be seen in game. You rarely ever play against him. Most players prefer to choose a different killer, and it's really sad given the fact that he is such a well-designed killer, or at least was such a well-designed killer. Back when DBD first came out, it came out with 3 killers, obviously. We had the Trapper, the Wraith, and the Hillbilly. One of these killers stood out from the other killers, that being the Hillbilly. People realized very early on that he was quite a bit better than his counterparts. He was able to get around the map faster, which means he could start chases quicker, and he also had the ability to insta-down survivors with his power, which was quite valuable at the time. The Hillbilly had quite the set of add-ons. Something that really made him quite strong and drew a lot of people to him were the power behind his add-ons and the playstyles they enabled you to engage in. Back then, Hillbilly had a really weird setup of add-ons. In the old days, Behaviour didn't actually have a set pattern when creating add-ons. Nowadays, every killer gets the same amount of add-ons. They have 4 common add-ons, 5 yellow add-ons, 5 green add-ons, 4 purple add-ons, and of course 2 iridescent add-ons. This wasn't always the case though, especially for Hillbilly for the longest time. Hillbilly actually didn't have any iridescent add-ons. He only had 2 purple add-ons, and he had a slew of other add-ons, all of which were actually really crazy. One combo that you've probably heard people talk about in the past was Crackabilly. It was a combination of his death engravings and a add-on he used to have, which is now used in name by the Leatherface, Bubba. Not the same effect though, is the Carburetor Tuning Guide. It was a combination of add-ons that effectively made you a really strong killer. It gave you basically everything. The death engravings would give you bonus movement speed while in your chainsaw. However, it would increase the charge time that your chainsaw had, but the Carburetor Tuning Guide would cover for basically everything else. It gave you reduced charge time, it gave you a lower cooldown after your chainsaw, it reduced the sound of your chainsaw for whatever reason, and it did something else. Oh, it reduced the bump, the cooldown when you bumped into something. It would make that less. I think it did that. The only thing it pretty much didn't do was increase your turning rate, but that wasn't too necessary. And it was a setup that was really popular on him for just everything it covered, all of the strength behind it. Despite his popularity, Behaviour would eventually announce that they were going to rework Hillbilly or take another look at him. Many people were kind of excited for this, as they did feel like Hillbilly's add-ons needed to be touched up. Some of them were a little bit overtuned, admittedly. He needed to be given that modern standard that I talked about earlier with the iridescent add-ons and 4 purples and all of that stuff. But people were not prepared for what Behaviour was about to drop on us. In the 4.1.0 patch, despite stating that they felt like Hillbilly was in a good place and was a well-designed killer, they released a number of very controversial changes to the Hillbilly. For starters, they reworked all of his add-ons, and to say that the add-ons are interesting would be quite an understatement. Compared to his older add-ons, it's like going from... I can't even describe it, I can't even make like a metaphor for it, but basically it's going from gold to absolute trash. His add-ons now are an absolute shell of what they used to be in power. They're not even close to what old Hillbilly add-ons used to be. Some people might say that that's at the time, or at least said that that was a good thing maybe, but we can agree now that he definitely almost needs another add-on pass to make his add-ons better. In fact, he would actually ship with quite possibly one of the most embarrassing add-ons in Dead by Daylight history. One of his add-ons now, the Mother's Helpers, as you know them, Currently, they give you a interesting effect where once you get stunned by a pellet, it reduces the charge time of your chainsaw for a short duration. Not a bad add-on, not the greatest, but it's still not bad. It's a useful effect at least. On release, or at least on his add-on pass, rework, whatever, this had a different effect. It gave you a 0.2 movement speed haste while a survivor was shining a flashlight on you. Yeah, it was not a great add-on. Survivors obviously most of the time don't just randomly shine flashlights on you, and I'm pretty sure as well the add-on didn't have a lingering effect at all. It was only when the survivor was shining the flashlight on you. It didn't, like, after they blinded you, you couldn't get like value from it afterwards. They had to literally be shining you with a flashlight, which was just so crazy. He also had all these other weird add-ons that have many caveats. These caveats still exist in the game today, where they're basically, you have something has to happen to activate a very mediocre effect. It's very weird stuff. There were other really bad add-ons as well. Both the Doom and Death engravings at the time got nerfed super hard down from what they used to be. I think it was like 20% movement speed down to like 7% or something drastic like that. You had add-ons like the low pro chains, which had an interesting effect where nowadays the low pro chains are actually pretty decent, but on release, it straight up gave you the speed limiter effect. It allowed you to run through pallets like it does now, pallets and breakable walls, and saw people, but you would only ever inflict one health state on the survivor. Nowadays, obviously, after you break a pallet, it's within 5 seconds. If you hit someone with the chainsaw, they only take one health state. But before, it was constant. You just had speed limiter. It was absolute garbage. Yet to say his add-ons weren't good was pretty much an understatement. Many people were already pretty angered by this. And really, that would have been enough maybe to turn a lot of people off of Hillbilly. But then they added something else on top of it. They gave him what many people thought was a completely unnecessary mechanic in the overheat mechanic. Basically, they added something on top of his chainsaw where if you started using your chainsaw more, eventually it would overheat and you would have to stop using it. Nowadays, overheat is actually not that bad of a mechanic. It's really not that obtrusive. Whenever I play Hillbilly, I don't really run into many issues with it unless I'm like aggressively using a lot of my chainsaw all at once, and then maybe I'll have to sit back and let the overheat charge down again. But on release, the mechanic was devastating. It was very punishing. You could maybe do like 1 or 2 big chainsaw runs as Hillbilly before having to basically wait for your chainsaw to cool down, which was just really, really not fun. For a killer that had a lot of skill expression at the time, it pretty much killed all of his skill expression. Since that initial rework, people tried him out a little bit, but it wouldn't be long until people eventually would sort of give up on Hillbilly, realizing that he was not really what he used to be. Not to mention, right around the corner at that time was going to be the release of another speed killer, the Blight, another fast killer that could get around the map, and many players, I'm sure, that used to play Hillbilly would get some interest in the Blight when he came out, seeing his power, seeing that his power was actually pretty good, and seeing that his add-ons were pretty stacked on top of that. It seems like Behavior, in many ways, has also forgotten about Hillbilly. That's why I'm making this video entirely. He's received almost no changes since his initial rework. He received a few changes right after that rework, where they adjusted the rate of overheat, where they made the overheat mechanic a little less punishing. They buffed up some of his add-ons. They changed some of his add-ons to not be as stupid. And much later down the line, they would add on to his Doom and Death engravings that you would reduce the overheat while you were charging your chainsaw, due to the fact that those add-ons also increased the amount of time it took to charge up your chainsaw. They didn't originally ship with that, so basically running the Doom and Death engravings meant that your chainsaw was going to overheat literally all the time. But since then, there have been almost no changes to his base power, almost nothing at all. Even if you're on the Steam page, I know this is kind of reading into things a little bit, but on the Steam page, on the splash art, you see all the 4 original survivors, and for killers, you see the Trapper, the wraith, the nurse, the huntress, and the hag, and not the hillbilly. Instead of seeing the 5 killers you're given at the start of the game, there is no hillbilly to be seen. Now, I do think that this is maybe just was an artistic choice. They thought it maybe looked better, but it really is kind of sad that he doesn't even get, despite being one of the original killers, he doesn't get a front row seat alongside all of the other killers that were added kind of earlier on in the game. I know Hag was also very early, but also it seems like it's listing all of the killers you get when you first start the game, and there's just no hillbilly to be seen, which is so sad to me. Honestly, I really hope something is in the works for hillbillies soon, not just add-ons. We've gotten quite a bit of add-on changes for him. I hope something is in the works with his base power, making it a bit more interesting, a little bit of buff. I honestly think if they do anything, just make the turning rate on his chainsaw a little bit better. Right now, people just don't think it's worth it to play hillbilly. The amount of effort you need to play this killer, to master this killer, is not worth the sort of middling payoff you end up getting if you do master this killer. What do you guys think about hillbilly, though? Do you think that he's kind of been forgotten about by Behaviour, maybe even forgotten about by the community? What kind of changes would you like to see come to hillbilly to help him out? Let me know in the comments. If you like the video, remember to like it and subscribe. It helps support the channel. And of course, I'll see you guys in the next one.